I'm sorry, I really don't. What are we doing? Those 8 words brought an abrupt, crushing halt to what was supposed to be a standard multi-million-dollar promotional interview. Robert Downey Jr. looked toward the door, shook his head in absolute disbelief, unclipped the microphone from his jacket, and walked out into the hallway, leaving one of Britain's most aggressive news anchors sitting alone in an empty chair. It remains one of the most famous, tense, and deeply uncomfortable press junket meltdowns ever captured on broadcast tape. If you love deep dive breakdowns into the exact moments where Hollywood PR completely shatters and the masks slip on live television, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for the Echo View right now. To understand why this 7-minute exchange exploded into a global media frenzy, you have to understand the invisible machinery of a Hollywood press junket. In April 2015, the Marvel Cinematic Machine was operating at the peak of its powers. Avengers: Age of Ultron was weeks away from hitting global box offices. Disney and Marvel had invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the production and marketing of this single film. To guarantee massive opening weekend numbers, they rented out entire floors of luxury hotels across major world capitals, flying in entertainment reporters, television hosts, and junket interviewers from every corner of the planet. The rules of these junkets are well understood by everyone in the industry, even if they are never spoken aloud on camera. A studio flies a journalist in, puts them up in a hotel, and grants them precisely 4 to 7 minutes with the biggest movie star on Earth. In exchange, the journalist is expected to play ball. You ask about the action sequences. You ask about the costume design. You ask what it is like working with the ensemble cast. You keep the energy high, you deliver easy promotional banter, and you leave with a polished clip that helps sell movie tickets while giving your network access to Hollywood royalty for the next blockbuster. It is an entirely manufactured transaction, built on mutual compliance and rigid public relations control. Robert Downey Jr. was not just any actor walking into these rooms. He was the undisputed cornerstone of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was the highest-paid actor in Hollywood, commanding tens of millions of dollars per picture, and he was universally recognized as the charismatic genius who had single-handedly built the Iron Man phenomenon from the ground up. But Downey also had a history. Long before he became the beloved, untouchable face of a multi-billion-dollar franchise, he had lived through an extraordinarily public, devastating chapter of personal ruin. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, his battles with severe substance addiction, high-profile arrests, court-mandated rehab stints, and actual state prison time were relentlessly plastered across world headlines. He had clawed his way back from absolute rock bottom through sheer discipline, personal rehabilitation, and undisputed artistic brilliance. By 2015, that dark chapter was firmly closed, buried under more than a decade of sobriety and unprecedented box office triumphs. He was in London to celebrate a superhero movie, not to relitigate the worst years of his life. Across from him sat Krishnan Guru-Murthy. Guru-Murthy was not an entertainment reporter looking for sound bites to play on a morning show. He was a veteran, hard-nosed anchor for Britain's Channel 4 News, a serious news organization with a long-standing reputation for hard-hitting investigative journalism and contentious political interrogations. Guru-Murthy did not operate within the polite, subservient boundaries of the Hollywood studio system. He did not care about Disney's marketing budget. He had no interest in asking softball questions about comic books, and he walked into that room with a hidden agenda that was destined to collide directly with the most powerful movie star on the planet. When the cameras started rolling inside that quiet London hotel suite, the initial interaction appeared completely normal on the surface. Robert Downey Jr. was seated comfortably in an armchair, dressed in a sharp suit and signature tinted glasses, radiating the effortless, rapid-fire charm that millions of fans loved. Krishnan Guru-Murthy began the conversation on standard ground. He asked about the themes of Avengers: Age of Ultron. He asked Downey about playing Tony Stark over multiple films, and whether the character was evolving into something darker and more complex. Downey answered smoothly, delivering the polished, engaging reflections that every studio publicist dreams of hearing. He spoke about the ensemble cast, the vision of director Joss Whedon, and the responsibility of headlining a franchise of that magnitude. For the first 2 minutes, it looked like every other standard press junket interview airing across the globe. But underneath the surface, Guru-Murthy was simply running down the clock, waiting for the exact moment to pivot away from the film and execute his real plan. At around the 3-minute mark, the entire room shifted. Guru-Murthy looked down at his notes, glanced back up, and abruptly changed the subject entirely. He abandoned the discussion about superhero cinema and brought up a quote Downey had given in an interview years earlier to the New York Times, shortly after his release from prison. In that old quote, Downey had made a philosophical comment about how you cannot go from a $500 a night hotel suite to a prison cell and remain a liberal. Guru-Murthy leaned forward and asked Downey to explain what he had meant by that statement, questioning whether his political beliefs had shifted to the right over the years. The air in the room instantly went cold. Downey's relaxed posture vanished. His eyebrows raised slightly above his tinted glasses, and his trademark charismatic smile completely disappeared. He stared at Guru-Murthy for several long seconds, letting the silence hang heavily between them. Downey did not immediately lash out. Instead, he fired a polite, unmistakable warning shot. "Are we promoting a movie?" That single question should have been a massive red flag for any interviewer. It was an explicit reminder of the context of the room, the Junket agreement, and the boundaries of the discussion. But Guru-Murthy refused to back down. He did not pivot back to the movie. He did not acknowledge the warning. Instead, he openly admitted that he had no intention of sticking to the film. Guru-Murthy replied that while they were talking about the movie, they also wanted to talk about Downey as an individual, adding that he did not know how comfortable Downey was talking about himself. Downey looked directly at him, his voice dropping into a quiet, icy tone that signaled extreme danger. "You have as much time as anyone else will." It was not an invitation to dig deeper. It was a clear warning that the clock was ticking and the interviewer was pushing his luck. Instead of reading the room, Guru-Murthy pressed forward with even more aggression. He looked at his watch, told Downey that they still had 2 or 3 minutes remaining on their promotional agreement, and told the actor that he could choose to answer the questions if he wanted to or stay silent. Downey did not say a word about politics. Instead, he looked down, focused his eyes directly on Guru-Murthy's lower body, and delivered a devastating psychological observation that exposed the interviewer's own nervousness. "Your foot's starting to jump a little bit. You better get to your next question." Downey's remark about the bouncing foot was not just casual banter. It was a direct psychological check, pointing out that even while Guru-Murthy was trying to project an air of journalistic authority, his own physical body language was betraying extreme tension. The warning could not have been clearer. Downey was giving him one final opportunity to salvage the interview, return to Avengers, Age of Ultron, and walk away with usable broadcast footage. Instead, Guru-Murthy crossed the point of no return. Guru-Murthy leaned back in his chair, took a breath, and brought up the darkest, most traumatic periods of Downey's personal life. He told Downey that the reason he was asking about his past was because Downey had previously spoken in other interviews about his relationship with his father, the dark periods he had entered, and his severe battles with drug addiction and alcohol. Then came the loaded, deeply invasive question. Guru-Murthy asked Downey whether he felt he was finally free of all those demons, or whether that dark past was still something actively haunting him. The disrespect in the room was absolute. This was not a hard-hitting investigative report on political corruption or corporate crime. This was a 5-minute movie junket for a comic book film, and an anchor was attempting to ambush a recovering addict about his family trauma and historical substance abuse solely to manufacture a sensational headline for his network. Downey did not scream. He did not throw anything. He looked off camera toward the studio door, making direct eye contact with his publicist standing in the shadows behind the lighting rigs. His expression was a mix of complete disbelief and quiet disgust. He turned his head back toward Guru-Murthy, looked directly into the interviewer's eyes, and said the words that would define the entire encounter. "I'm sorry, I really don't. What are we doing?" Guru-Murthy, visibly flustered by the direct confrontation, offered a weak, defensive justification. "Well, I'm just asking questions, that's all." Downey did not argue. He did not debate journalistic ethics. He knew that staying in that chair for 1 second longer would only validate the ambush. He reached up to his jacket, unhooked the lavalier microphone, pulled the transmitter pack out, and dropped it onto the armrest. He stood straight up, looked down at Guru-Murthy with a completely flat expression, and said a single definitive word. "Bye." As Downey walked past the camera crew and headed toward the exit, he gave a quick, sarcastic wave and looked back at Guru-Murthy one last time, muttering a parting shot under his breath. "It's all getting a little Diane Sawyer in here." He walked out the door, leaving the cameras rolling on an empty chair and a stunned interviewer sitting in complete silence. The entire press junket room sat frozen in shock. The publicists rushed in, the audio crew scrambled to stop the recording, and the most anticipated Marvel promotional tour of the year had just suffered a catastrophic, unscripted collapse. Within hours of the walkout, Channel 4 News made a deliberate and controversial decision. They uploaded the entire unedited 7-minute video straight to YouTube. The clip spread across the internet like wildfire, racking up millions of views in a matter of hours and sparking a fierce, polarizing debate across the global media landscape. One camp sided with Krishnan Guru-Murthy and the traditional hard news establishment. Journalists from various legacy outlets argued that a reporter's job is not to serve as an unpaid marketing arm for Disney or Marvel. They argued that celebrities should not be allowed to demand fawning, softball coverage while expecting the press to ignore major aspects of their public lives and personal philosophies. From their perspective, Guru-Murthy was simply practicing real, uncompromising journalism by refusing to stick to a sanitized corporate script. However, the overwhelming majority of the public, media commentators, and industry figures saw the interview for what it truly was, a bad-faith sensationalist ambush. Commentators pointed out that press junkets operate under clear, agreed-upon parameters. If a journalist wants to conduct an in-depth retrospective on an actor's past addiction, rehabilitation, and family trauma, they schedule a dedicated long-form profile where the subject is given advance notice and the emotional space to engage with those sensitive topics. To lure an actor into a 5-minute hotel room slot under the pretense of promoting a family superhero blockbuster, only to pivot without warning into 10-year-old drug arrests, was widely condemned as cheap tabloid exploitation masquerading as serious news. Robert Downey Jr. himself remained silent for several days before finally addressing the incident on The Howard Stern Show. Downey did not mince words. He explained that junket interviews are transactional events designed to sell a product to consumers, not hostile interrogation rooms. He referred to Guru-Murthy as a bottom-feeding sycophant who hijacked a promotional opportunity simply to generate viral notoriety for himself. Downey made it clear that his walkout was not about running away from his past, which he had spoken about openly and honestly for decades in appropriate settings, but about setting a firm boundary against exploitative, unearned media aggression. The incident remains a landmark case study in modern entertainment journalism and media psychology. It marked the exact moment where the traditional media illusion shattered, exposing the deep, simmering tension between corporate PR machinery and aggressive news sensationalism. It showed that even in an industry where stars are trained to smile, nod, and endure every awkward interaction for the sake of the box office, there is a line that cannot be crossed. Where do you stand on this infamous standoff? Was Krishnan Guru-Murthy justified in pushing past the standard Hollywood PR script? Or was Robert Downey Jr. completely right to shut down an exploitative, unprofessional ambush? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with fellow movie fans, and subscribe to the Echo View for more forensic breakdowns of the most explosive confrontations in entertainment history. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next investigation.